Hello and welcome back to the Into the Mic podcast with Carson.
And Zachary.
And today we're talking a bunch of crappy players get big contracts. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with that, it's the NBA 2016 offseason. Probably the worst offseason in history, in recent history at least. There was a lack of talent and a lot of money. Teams were looking to get some splashes, hopefully get some good players for with all the money that they had, but there was no talent really, other than a couple players. And so they overpaid for players who were maybe not as good as they could have gotten. And so, now we're paying the price for it. What is it, 2.5 years down the road? Or no, 2 years down the road. And I'll talk about that. But just to list, the players that got overpaid so you have an idea of what we're talking about. Myers Leonard, Jan Mahinmi, Timofey Mozgov, Chandler Parsons, Lou Walding, Mike Conley, Marvin Williams, Nick Batum, Dwight Howard, Evan Turner, Dwayne Wade, Al Jefferson, Matthew Dellavedova, Joakim Noah, Kent Blazemore, Joe Johnson, John Lure, Bismack Biyombo, Ryan Anderson, Rajon Rondo, Harrison Barnes, Allen the Crab Boy, J.R. Smith, Miles Plumlee, Cody Zeller, and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. There's a lot of them. So, yeah. And then also, we have something else that we're going to be trying out this episode. But all that when we come back. Alright, we're back. Now, Zachary, would you like to introduce our new section?
Yeah, so we got a new segment that we're going to start. Every time we come back from the music, we're going to have this segment called News and Notes. Basically, we're just going to give you some notable things that have occurred in baseball, football, basketball, from around the league, any news, any signings, big trades, something like that. Just give you a brief little bit of that before we get to the meat of our podcast. Just to get you guys informed if you haven't seen it. Obviously, we stay up to date on all the things, and we just want you guys to be up to date as well. So just a quick, 5 minutes, after music, and we'll just get you guys to run down what's going on around all the associations and leagues. So today, let's start off with that. Toronto Blue Jays are going to retire Roy Halladay's number 32 on opening day. If you don't know who that is, unfortunately, he passed away last year at the age of 40. Had a career ERA as 3.38 as a relief and starting pitcher in his career. Career wins and losses 203 and 105, which is really good for a guy who played 15 years in the league. He was an 8-time All-Star, 2-time Cy Young winner, which is given to the best pitcher. He was a remarkable player. And he really deserves this number being retired, especially after the tragic passing last year. In other news, also in the Major League Baseball, Esteban Luisa arrested for 44 pounds of heroin and cocaine. If you don't know who that is, he's the second winningest pitcher who has come from Mexico. Really good pitcher. But he had some problems with this in the past, and he's arrested with a large amount of heroin and cocaine. So it's unfortunate from a guy who was really good in the major leagues. Like I said, second most winningest pitcher from Mexico. It's tough to see a guy like that who represents a country like that have to be arrested, especially with the racial tensions going on between some Americans and Mexicans for that reason, being some say drug dealers, and that's all Mexicans. I'm not going to get into that, but unfortunate for that. Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy G, signed a 5-year, $127.5 million contract with the 49ers. Obviously, this is very big, only 25 years old. San Francisco really got a young stud in this quarterback. They have him locked up for the next 5 years. He took a team who was 1-10 when he got there, thinking top 3 pick. Definitely he comes in there with the wide receiving core that their top wide receiver is, Marquise Goodwin. who's a good speed receiver, but not a number one guy. Obviously, trying to look to fix that in the draft. And he gets big payday, very deserved. He came in, won 5 in a row after that 1-10 start for the 49ers. Won all 5 of his starts. Replaced Brian Hoyer, who, as you should know, is very horrible. Not somebody you want to start with. And 49ers, since the Colin Kaepernick era left off, have not found a good franchise quarterback. Jimmy G seems to be that guy who can bring some talent and get some good offense on that team. They've been kind of stuck in the bottom of the league for past couple of years, looking to turn that around. And we also have Yu Darvish finally breaking the free agent slump in Major League Baseball, signing a 6-year, $126 million contract with the Chicago Cubs. As a St. Louis Cardinals fan, this pains me to say that Cubs are going to have a pretty good pitching rotation next year, although a couple of them are going to be old and overpaid. Darvish had his playoff struggles, obviously, with the Los Angeles Dodgers. But with Chicago, he's hoping to find new light. He was very good with the Astros before that, before he got traded. Very big contract, but a guy who deserves it. Chicago got themselves a good one. And it was kind of quiet for a long time in Major League Baseball. No big signings, just a couple trades since winter meetings in December. So this finally got the ball rolling. He signed, and then Todd Frazier signed later with a 2-year, $17 million contract. But Darvish finally gets his payday after a long wait. And Chicago looks to be yet again another playoff contender.
Yeah, so I'm sad to say it, but we have another arrest to talk about in Major League Sports. This one is an NFL. Last one was an MLB. This one is rookie linebacker Reuben Foster for the 49ers. More 49ers news, but this one is bad. Was again arrested, not for the marijuana this time. This time he was arrested for domestic abuse. I'm gonna try not to go into details, but apparently he dragged his girlfriend down a hall after a fight. So just not good stuff. Arrested for that. So hopefully he can stay out of trouble with the law after this. He's had a lot of trouble with it in his career and his life. Some more NFL news. Next, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. More Chiefs news. Once again, this time they cut 7-time Pro Bowler Darrelle Revis. I believe he was 32 years old. Really fell off a cliff these past couple of years. Really not the same player anymore. You can kind of see it coming. It's I kind of expected it. A lot of people kind of expected it. It was just something that was going to happen. And he's gone now. Maybe he'll get signed by another team. Maybe not. Maybe he'll retire now. But another NFL news: Frank Reich, the offensive coach, or the former offensive coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, signed a 5-year contract with the Indianapolis Colts to be their head coach. As you know, or as you might know, they've been looking for a head coach for a while now. They find, hopefully a good one. Well, actually, hopefully a bad one. I don't like to wish bad, but as a Titans fan, I don't like to see the Colts do well. So, good luck to him, but bad luck to the Colts. And then now, some big basketball news. I think this is our first thing to talk about in basketball this week. Number 34 is now hanging in the rafters in Boston. Paul Pierce's number. An NBA legend, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest Celtics players of all time. And I don't say that lightly. One of the greatest of all time. Amazing player, deserved it. There was a lot of drama surrounding it, but it's done now. It's over. 34 is hanging in the rafters, so that's good. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, so now let's get into the horrendous, awful, overpaid 2016 NBA offseason.
Oh, yes.
Carson lifted off, a whole bunch of names. We may not have caught all of them, but, guys like, Myers Leonard, not backup center at best, 4 years, $41 million. Alan Crabb, also signed with the Blazers along with Leonard. got $75 million over 4 years. Evan Turner, $70 million with the Blazers. Dwayne Wade, $42 with the Bulls over 2 years. Matthew Dellavedova with the Bucks, 4-year, $38 million contract. Jan Mahinmi, you should not recognize that name for a reason, $72 million. Joakim Noah, now being benched by the Knicks and not might get a buyout, 4 years, $71 million. Nick Batum with the Charlotte Hornets, 5 years, $120 million. That's a max contract. Nick Batum have injury problems and has not been able to produce nearly close to $120 million. Man, the list goes on and on, and we're now seeing the effects that NBA teams, especially going to this free agency, there's not a lot of teams that have cap space, and some of the ones that do cannot lure big time free agents. Teams are stuck with these bad contracts because all of these players signed for 2, 3, 4 years are still being paid that amount of money. There's no way for these teams to get out of it besides a trade, but then you'd have to trade an asset or a young asset, pick to get rid of it. A lot of teams don't want to do that, so they're stuck with these bad contracts. And there's also with the past trade deadline, you had Kemba Walker was the trade talks because he was on a really good contract, but they were wanting to ship. Marvin Williams, Nick Batum, Michael Gilchrist being paid $13 million a year. Any of the guys like that, just to get rid of cap space so they can finally rebuild, try to get some young talent with that money. There's a whole bunch of teams, whole bunch of players that are overpaid.
Yeah, just so many players that were overpaid. Way too many. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this happened for 2 reasons, I believe. I'm sorry, my brain isn't working. 2 reasons, 2 main reasons. One, that there was little talent on the board. Mike Conley was one of the top free agents. Now, really good player, team leader for the Grizzlies, but not by any means really I wouldn't say like an MVP, not an MVP level player. Has never been an All-Star, but he was one of the best on the board. Chandler Parsons was at the top of the board too. I mean, it was just a weak free agent class because all the players that were at the top were either already re-signed or were going to get re-signed for sure. And it was just it was crazy. It was all these players were just getting handed out contracts like crazy. And the other reason this happened is because teams, that is when the salary cap spiked for NBA teams. It went crazy. It went so far up. Teams had all this cap space. They didn't know what to do with all of it. So they were like, Evan Turner, you should get a lot of money. We're just going to throw our money at you. Matthew Dellavedova, here's $8.5 million a year. Come play for us. Joakim Noah, here's a lot of money. All these teams were just throwing out money for no reason. And, now they're wondering why they have no cap. And then, people like us go and look back at this 2016 offseason and say, well, now the fans are hurting from it. The teams are hurting from it. The players are hurting from it. I mean, one player I can think of that has really been hurt by this is Lou Williams. Now, as you might know, Lou Williams was huge. He was huge in trade talks right before this year's trade deadline. Of course, didn't get dealt because the Clippers signed him to a 3-year, $24 million contract. Now, that's a steal of a contract, I think. That's $8 million a year, roughly. And he was a fringe all-star. Fringe all-stars can make up to $25 million a year. I mean, that's crazy how that happened. Now, I'm going to let Zachary talk about that.
Yeah, so, I mean, he kind of set kind of gave you a glimpse for what this next free agency is going to be like, because you're going to have talented players like Paul George, DeMarcus Cousins, Tyreek Evans even, all on the free agency. Julius Randle, one of those other guys who was in contract negotiations, trade talks before the deadline, that have all been affected by both the Lou Williams signing and or the 2016 offseason, because you have very talented players, and so they're all reaching free agency, barring none of them sign an extension, which is looking like none of those players that I mentioned will be signing an extension. So all hitting the open market.
Yeah. So, oh, sorry.
I was just coughing for a sec. They're all hitting the market. Teams either don't have the appeal to them to come on and play for them. They don't want to be part of a rebuild, or they can't give them the money they want. Avery Bradley's a good example. He was a guy coming into the season wanted in the high teens, 15, 16, 17 million dollars a year for a very good two-way guard. He didn't have a very good year at Detroit. Obviously that brought his value a little bit, but he still wanted, $14, $15 million, and now it's looking like he's only going to get $10, $11 million. And the main reason for that is that teams don't have the cap, and they don't want to offer him so much money that they can't do anything else with it. Basically, Lou Williams signing that cheap contract is going to be like Tyreek Evans. He's 2-3 years younger than Lou Williams, both putting up 20-plus points a game, about 5 assists. But Tyreek Evans, maybe wanted to get $15 million after a breakout season, is now going to get $8, $9, $10 million, and that's ridiculous. Like Harlan said, all-stars or fringe all-stars should get 20, 25 million range. They might have to take $10 million less dollars than that. Just because of the 2016 offseason. And it wasn't any of the players' fault. I want to make sure you can't hate on guys like John Mahimi, Joakim Noah, guys like that. At the time, these deals had to be made by any team, any organization, any player that could get this money. If basketball is a business, so any player that works for it is in it for the money. Whatever anybody says about loyalty, anything like that, it's a business. You have to earn your living. These guys work their butts off every day. They want to get the money for that. And so when you hit the free agency at the right time, like they did in 2016, they went for the big money because they could. Teams had to use this. They didn't have to, but they used the cap that they had at the time. They thought the cap with the CBA agreement was going to keep going up like this. So there was no reason not to give guys $2, $3, $4 million and overpay them. They thought the cap was going to go up, and these deals would not look like all the big deals that they were today. So basically, the CBA has not worked out that way. The cap has gone back down to what it usually is, and so we might be seeing deals for Avery Bradley around $12 million, which sounds not like a lot compared to what he wanted, but it's kind of getting back to the norm from before the CBA talks. In past years, Michael Jordan, for example, this is way back, but over his whole career, he earned $136 million for playing basketball. And right now, Mike Conley's on a 5-year, $150 million contract for 5 years, and he's not even an all-star. So obviously, the salary has gone up, but now it's going to start to come back down. Guys going to getting 3-4-year contracts, in the $50, $60 range if you're a decent player. Starters are going to be the exception, all-stars all the way down through, top 10 at your position, whatever, getting 20, 25. Other than that, you're going to be looking at low teens, high single-digit numbers for any role player as opposed to 2016 offseason. If you were any talent, you were overvalued in that market. Carson mentioned the lack of talent, and that made everybody else look very good in that free agency class. So, there's a lot of money being thrown around for decent players. Definitely, in hindsight, it was a horrible decision by everybody involved, but it was no choice.
Yeah, so I like what Zachary said earlier about don't be mad at the players for this. Now, if your favorite team, say, I'm going to use Jan Mahinmi as an example. Now, Jan Mahinmi, of course, plays for the Wizards. He has 2.5 more years left on his deal. Lots of money left there, tons of money. And of course, I'm sure in hindsight they were looking back on that and saying, well, this was a horrible decision, but you have to look at this from the player's view. Like Zachary said, it's a business. Loyalty, all that stuff, it does matter, but, at the end of the day, they're going to be looking out for themselves more than their team because, they're human beings and they want to do well in life. So, Jan Mahinmi, comes off the best year of his career by far in Indiana, has a breakout year, a fringe starter slash really good bench player, and the Wizards are looking at that like, and he was an amazing defensive player that year, and the Wizards are looking at that and looking and seeing, oh, maybe he can replace Marcin Gortat in the starting lineup, or we can play a dual center lineup and have one offensive, one defensive, and it'll work out really well. So we're going to give him this extra money to make sure he comes here, and we'll have this defensive-minded center who's really good, and it'll be good. And if it doesn't work out, the CBA will get some more money. It'll be fine. We'll sign some more players. But that's not how it worked. And if I was Jan Mahinmi, I would have taken that contract any day of the week because I'm a fringe starter, and they're offering me this big money. Of course, I'm going to take that.
Right. I like what you said. Management is thinking, we're going to get more money. So even if this is, slightly bad, it can't be all that bad. So we're going to get more money to sign a guy to replace him. But like I said, it's not going to work out that way. Let's take an example that most of our listeners will know. Chandler Parsons on the Grizzlies. Yeah, he's had injury problems his whole career. Memphis, as it now turns out, did not even give him a physical before he signed with us. 4-year, $94 million contract. At the time, like I said, this was a very good decision by the front office. Chandler Parsons obviously gets the money from front office. You finally get a playmaking, shooting wing who can play next to Mike Conley and Marc Gasol and take that offensive pressure away from them. He looks like a really good fit. David Fizdale praised Chandler Parsons that season. He even said he was going to play him like he played LeBron in Miami. But injuries among inefficiency and not having good strength coming back from those injuries when he does play after those injuries have not been great, and definitely not $94 million. So for the Grizzlies, they thought they were going to get this good player, maybe help recruit some more free agents in the future. He was our first really big free agent that we've signed in the offseason. Most of our guys that have come here are through trades or the draft. He was our big free agent. We lured him away from a team and got him max money, and we thought he deserved the max money. But now it's really hampering our free agency for last year, this year, and the coming years. Nobody wants his contract, obviously, because he does not produce. Doesn't even get double-digit scoring, and he has injury problems again this year with his knees. He improved from last year, but he's not still a $94 million man. I love the guy. I gave him a second chance this season just because I knew his upside, but he's just not going to reach that, and he most likely won't. So the Grizzlies are stuck with his contract. What are they going to do about it? Really nothing, unless you get a team, unless they pair it with a young guy like Andrew Harrison, who's shown flashes, Ivan Rapp, who was high second-round draft pick this past summer. Unless you package him with that or a couple picks, there's no way you get him off your team. You can't cut him, obviously, because that doesn't help your cap space. You can't get any trade assets that are paid any amount of money. You can't sign anybody big unless you cut or trade away some of your other guys that are good role players. Tyreke Evans, maybe he can re-sign with us if we have the cap space. Definitely looking like a less possibility because Chandler Parsons has taken up so much cap. Teams like John Wall and Bradley Beal and Jan Mahinmi on the Wizards, let's keep with that example, they basically have almost 3 max contracts between the 3 of those, and that means that they can't pay role players. They have to rely on lack of depth and just rely on those 3 guys. And when one of those 3 guys is horrible, like Chandler Parsons and or Jan Mahinmi, that team is not going to get very far.
Yeah, so remember, this is a delicate topic for Zachary and I as Grizzlies fans. The Grizzlies spent almost $60 million a year in cap room that year. Now, I honestly loved the Chandler Parsons signing. I was so excited. I made it my desktop picture. I made it my phone picture. Everything was Chandler Parsons. I bought a jersey. I bought a jersey that I'm wearing right now. Just because, we're talking about it. And it didn't work out. That's just how it goes. The NBA is a business. The Grizzlies saw a business opportunity. Chandler Parsons saw a business opportunity. And, it's rough. It's rough talking about it because we know now that we are screwed for the next 2.5 years. No cap room. Um, and Mike Conley making $30 million a year. That's a weird topic to talk about as a Grizzlies fan because, obviously we love Mike Conley. We love everything he's done for our organization, but is $30 million really worth an all-star or a non-all-star? I mean, somebody who's never made the all-star game and is 30 years old and has injury problems. And I mean,
Right.
these.
The only reason that I think you should give a guy $30+ million if you're a LeBron or a Steph or a KD, guys who know you can change your franchise. Mike Conley, I hate to admit it, cannot change a franchise with one guy. But you pay him like he's going to, and then you add injury problems onto that and a poor inefficiency before he got injured this season. And that contract gets worse and worse. You just criticize at the time just because we gave him the most money you could give any player at that time. That it was the biggest contract until LeBron signed later that year in NBA history. And so Mike Conley's already getting criticized. Then he adds injury problems, obviously not making an all-star like Carson said. He may have been paid $20, $25 million. That would not have been a bad contract. But the matter of $5, $6 million a year for some of these guys is a big difference for these NBA teams. If Nick McTims only gets $19 million a year, that might not be so bad. You can live with that. But with the Charlotte Hornets, you just can't pay him $24, almost $25 million a year for a guy who also has injury problems and also has not been a franchise-changing player. And with the Hornets even more, they have a whole bunch of players that they signed that offseason. They were very aggressive. They thought they were getting talent. And they had to overpay to re-sign the players that they did and lure Dwight Howard to Charlotte that year. And it obviously did not work out. And looking into trades impact, I already mentioned this past trade deadline, but next year some of these deals may be expiring, may not be. But teams are still going to want to get rid of an expiring contract. It'll be weird to see what free agents that signed this summer. Maybe they can go somewhere else if they sign a 1 or 2 year deal, try to get a big contract extension. Teams trying to get rid of the cap space next year. But this free agency has a lot of talent. DeMarcus Cousins, Paul George, Tyreek Evans, Julius Randle, all guys who can be great number one and or number two options, scoring or defensively if you're in the case of Julius Randle or Paul George. And they're young too. None of those players are over 30 years old. They're not washed up I wouldn't call Dwight Howard washed up, but he's not the 2008, Dwight Howard, when he was on the Magic. These guys are all very talented. They should all be getting paid $25+ million. In the case of Paul George and DeMarcus Cousins, Tyreek Evans should be being paid $12 to $15 million. Julius Randle should be being paid $12 million a year, just because he's so young and he has so much talent. Like I said, you were going to trade Julius Randle, and they actually had to trade D'Angelo Russell last year to clear cap money so that they can try to get a free agent because they have a big market, so obviously they're going to lure some interest, so they just need the cap. Obviously, Paul George rumors, he might want to go to LA. They need to offer him the money if he's going to seriously consider that. But like I said, you were going to consider trading away Julius Randle and a second for a late first. Something stupid like that obviously doesn't work out for you other than clearing cap space. But if the 2016 offseason does not go down, Timothy Mozgov does not sign that massive contract with the Lakers. They do not have to trade D'Angelo Russell to get rid of that cap. They don't have to take in any salary. They have a lot more money to use. They don't have to get rid of D'Angelo. You have D'Angelo and Lonzo potentially, and Brandon Ingram on one team. That team would not be bottom of the lottery like they are right now. They are showing some upside, but they're going to be losing most likely Julius Randle this offseason solely because of that 2016 offseason. And Julius Randle himself might need to take a pay cut this offseason somewhere else. It's just going to be very interesting. 2016 offseason is going to be brought up a lot this offseason. the next couple of years even, because people still are baffled. Well, not baffled, but they're still angry at how much money went out to decent, less than decent role players, and even people who are decent or even better, fringe starters, like Al Jefferson at the time. He got paid $10 million a year, but now looking back, he should not have been paid more than 5 or 6. And like I said, that's a big difference. If you're talking about $4 million a year, that's a big difference on your cap.
Yeah, so 3 more things I need to talk about. One more player that this really, really affects, another Clipper, DeAndre Jordan. Now, of course, he really only has like 2 options now. He can either, of course, do the simple thing, return back to the Clippers on the player option, make around $25 million a year, and play for the Clippers, who will probably be, bottom of the, or not bottom, but bottom of the playoffs in the Western Conference next year, like 6, 7, 8 seed is where I envision them next year, whether they get Avery Bradley or not, and stuff like that. But, or his second option is he can go play for a team like the Suns or like the Kings, a crappy team with cap space, and make $30+ million a year, but have to play on a crappy team and really waste the rest of his prime on that team. Now, if I were him, I would choose the first option, of course, but this is the effects of the 2016 offseason. Players like DeAndre Jordan either have to play for less money on their same team, or they can go to a crappy team for more money. Now, that's ridiculous that we have to go through that because players like Myers Leonard got $11 million a year, or players like Marvin Williams got $14 million a year, Dwight Howard, Evan Turner, all these players, because they're making so much money, teams don't have any room to sign players like DeAndre Jordan, which is ridiculous. Now, another thing, how does this affect us? How does the 2016 affect you and me as fans? How does it affect me and Zachary as fans? It affects everything. Our teams don't have cap space to trade. Trade talks are harder to do because you have all these bad contracts on the books. Free agency is, of course, harder to do. The draft is more difficult because, rookie contracts, you have to have money to do those. And just, it's harder to do everything, and everything is more painful. You don't have cap room. You don't have anything, really, because you don't have any flexibility. The Grizzlies have absolutely no flexibility right now because they signed all these players. And it's just, it affects everything. It's bad. It's really, really bad.
Right. We keep bringing up business decisions. But you said something along the lines of, DeAndre Jordan is going to have to either choose a business decision, or is he going to take less money and potentially not get a large contract next offseason if he declines a little bit. He's going to have to choose if he's going to get big money in Sacramento, where they're obviously going to be rebuilding. Obviously, DeMarcus Cousins, when he was there, did not enjoy his time. There's not been a lot of talent over the years in Sacramento. They have some potential in the 3 rookies they drafted this past season, but still they have a long ways to go before they're even playoff contenders. And as much as you want to say DeAndre Jordan does not change that, like Mike Conley, he's a good player. He is not somebody who you can rebuild around. When the time comes for the Grizzlies, Mike Conley should not be with us in the rebuild, whether that's next year or in 2 seasons. If he's getting paid $30 million and he's going to be 31, 32, that is not somebody I want you have to give cap space to when you're rebuilding and not trying to win. But DeAndre Jordan, business decision. Or is he going to risk not having a large amount of money? I think, like you said, he's going to stay in LA. There's a much bigger chance now, as it was before the Lou Williams signing, that he is going to stay in Los Angeles. Before the Lou Williams signing, he said, okay, maybe free agency can still give me a lot of money. Maybe I'll still get that big deal, even if it's not with Los Angeles. So he's going to opt out of the player option he has for next season. But Lou Williams signs that low contract. All NBA teams perk their heads up and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe we can offer guys the amount that we can and not what they want. So there's going to be a lot of negotiation between players and organizations. I hope it does not come down to what the Major League Baseball teams had to do this offseason, or not give big time players like Yu Darvish and Jake Arrieta, JD Martinez, guys like that, big money simply because they were afraid of what would happen in the future. NBA slightly different, but you still have some parallels where you don't want your cap space to become so crammed that you are stuck, you are paralyzed because you're paying everybody so much money on your team. Like the Hornets, they're not going to be in the playoffs. They're not going to be top seeds. They have talent, but what do you do with guys like Kemba Walker, Dwight Howard? Nobody wants Nick Batum, Marvin Williams, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist's contracts. So you're going to have to package Kemba and Dwight and with one of those players. And at that point, you're free to do what you want, but you're in the rebuild anyway, so it's not really much freedom.
Yeah. So do you have anything else important you need to talk about? Because there's one more thing I want to say.
Well, go ahead.
All right, so the last thing I need to talk about, an important question, I think. Will the 2016 offseason ever repeat itself? That's a hard question to answer, I think. It's one that's kind of weird right now because we're still recovering from the 2016 offseason, and we will be for the next 3.5 years till all those 4 and 5 year contracts expire. The majority of them were 4-year contracts, which it's rough because we have to sit through them for 4 years of basketball and 4 years of teams not having any cap space, and finally we'll be free, but that won't be for a while, sadly. So, but soon. Now, do I think it will repeat itself? Yes. I do think it will. Not anytime soon, but I think it will. In the next 20 years, I think there will be somebody else sitting at a table talking about the 2016 offseason. Or a different.
I personally do not think it's going to happen. Simply because you have a lot of variables that go into stuff like this. Lack of talent in the free agents. If you have a lot of prime-time players that are going to get big money anyway, you don't feel like teams feel less inclined to give role players money as well because you already have guys getting that much money and they deserve it. So the bar is set higher, but that means role players' bar gets set lower, if you know what I mean. The other thing is that if or when CBA goes up as drastically as it does, which it itself might not do because they're learning from this mistake and have it go all the way up in one off season instead of gradually growing over the next 4 or 5 years. If it happens like the case was in 2016, teams are still going to learn from this mistake. They're going to know, even if players think they can get $72 million through Jan Mahinmi, they're going to know that you're not going to get that because teams do not want to have the same situation they had years prior in 2016 through 2019, 2020. So I think this is going to be a learning experience, as rough as it is a learning experience for a lot of teams. It's going to be we know that we did wrong. We know we've messed up, and players might realize Chandler Parsons, he knows now because people in Memphis have booed him. He has not been playing well, and he knows he hasn't played well enough for $94 million contract. He's expressed that publicly in interviews. So they're going to know that I do not want to be the player that brings down a whole team from playoff contention just because I am underperforming my contract. And when you have a contract that big, it's very easy to underperform. So they're going to learn from it. Teams are going to learn from it. The CBA is going to learn from it, try to grow out that contract, and not have it so much increase in 1 year. I don't see it happening again.
Well, yeah, like you said, a lot of factors go into it, but at the end of the day, it's a business. Bad things happen to businesses, and this could always happen again, or it could never happen again. I hope it never does because I don't want 2 more high school freshmen to have to sit through this pain ever again of watching the NBA just be horrible for 4 or 5 years because of some stupid GM's decisions to sign some crappy players to huge contracts. I hope this never happens again. But humans make errors. They make big errors. This was a big one. It's a rough situation. And, 3.5 years down the road, we'll be free from this. Hopefully it never happens again. I think that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, I think we wrapped everything up. You made some good points. Just to finish out there, I don't have much more to say.
All right, well, yeah, I think that's it for the 2016 offseason. We really hope you enjoyed. Make sure you stay tuned for the next episode. Next one will most likely be on Saturday. Scheduling is hard. It'll probably be Saturday, and we're talking about some more stuff. It'll be fun, and we hope you enjoyed. Follow our Instagram, nt.d.mike. Shameless plugs. Thanks for listening. We'll see